Hi guys, and welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to do a little tutorial on how to transform some of your mini cross stitch projects. So if you've been following the tutorials on the channel already, you may have got to grips with the basics of stitching with one colour or maybe a few colours and adding some backstitch as well. Now, a lot of projects are actually quite large and will generally need to be framed. But if you're anything like me, you're kind of running out of wall space or have run out altogether. So I like to make projects into things that I can use personally. Now, whether that is bags or cushions, the easiest one to do is a pincushion. So that's what I'm going to show you today. Here is my mini pincushion. I have had this stitched up since 2011 and it needed to be made into something I can use. So I've just used the stitched panel on the front and I've got a plain batik panel on the back. Let's get started, shall we? I'm going to show you how to make this up. You're going to need your finished cross stitch piece. This one's just been serged around the edge, so it's just been overlocked just to stop the fabric from fraying. I've also got a square of fabric which is exactly the same size. You're also going to need some pins and clips and some toy stuffing. What you're going to do is put both fabrics face to face. So if you've got a fabric which has got right and a wrong side, I don't really have a right or wrong side to this batik, but if you had a plain cotton, for example, with a print on one side and not the other side, you would put your print against your cross stitching. So I'm just going to pop these two face to face, line up all of the edges. I'm then going to clip or pin all the way around the edge, and I'm going to leave a little hole at the very bottom so that I can turn it through to the right way. So what I've done here is flipped my work over, so I've got the batik on the other side and I've got my stitching piece face down. I've put a couple of clips around each side and I've just put one in the bottom because that's where I'm going to leave a hole so that I can turn it through. I'm going to start sewing roughly around here, so in line with my stitching. I'm going to use the edge of my presser foot as my seam allowance guide, and I'm going to stitch all the way around and stop roughly the same place on the other side, and that will leave this section open to turn it through. All I'm going to do is do a back tack to start, stitch all the way around and pivot in my corners, and stitch another back tack to finish. So I've got the edge of my presser foot just sitting on the edge of my fabric. I've pretty much lined it up with the edge of my stitching. I've got my needle in my fabric. I'm going to do a small back tack, and then I'm going to stitch to the first corner. Make sure your needle is in your fabric, lift up your presser foot and pivot all of your work before you put the presser foot back down. You must make sure you put the presser foot back down. I'm going to take this clip out because it's in the way. We're then going to continue sewing all the way around. Again, taking your clips or pins out as you go. Let's move this one over. Making sure to pivot nicely in your corners. One more side to go. Last one. And that's it. So just trim off any of your loose threads. Now, normally I would cut into the corners just to take off the excess fabric. Now I'm only going to do that with my batik fabric, my plain fabric, because where this fabric for the cross stitching is an even weave fabric, it's got less strands in the weave, which means that I don't want it to unravel if I push too far in the corner. So I'm just snipping off these just to reduce a little bit of the bulk, and then we can turn it through the right way from that hole that we've got in the bottom. So now I like to fold over my seam allowance to the back and then fold the other half over as well, so I get nice points when I pull these through, like so. It gives me a much nicer point than just trying to pull it all through at the same time. So let's do this one, fold to the back, make a nice corner and pull that through. Pull both of those through now. Again, push the corners out and the bottom. Now you could put a chopstick in here, but you've got to be very careful you don't come through your stitching fabric. So I just like to roll them between my fingers just to get the edges out as much as I can. And then you sort of make sure that that seam allowance from the opening is tucked in. So that's the front and back. And then we're going to stuff it with some toy stuffing. You shouldn't need an awful lot of stuffing. You're just going to push it all in through that little hole in the bottom until you've got it to a nice thickness that you're happy with. So just little bits at a time. You don't want to put too much in one go and then have it split a seam. So just put a little bit in at a time. Make sure it goes right into the corners. There we are. So you just got to make sure that that seam allowance sits inside the hole, so inside that opening. It's all nice and puffy and squidgy now. I think that's about right. You could obviously add a little bit more. You could add a piece of wire wool if you wanted it to try and keep your pins nice and sharp. Next, you're just going to need a needle and thread, and we are going to whip stitch this closed. I have a needle and a thread. What I've done is just folded a length of thread in half, so I've got a loop at one end. And then I'm going to use this as a loop start so that I don't have to worry about sorting out any knots and hiding them. So I'm going to go from the inside of the fabric into the stitched fabric first. I'm only going to go do a small stitch near the edge of my opening so that I can use that loop in a little while. I'm going to spin it around, go into the edge of your contrasting fabric, your base fabric, and stitch through, pick up the loop and stitch, pull your needle through that loop, and that is going to seal that first bit. I then go back into the base fabric, pick up a teeny tiny bit of the fabric and push my needle through. And what we're going to do is zigzag. So we're going to do like a ladder stitch. You could whip by just stitching through both layers across like this, and then you keep going across and across. But I like to do a ladder stitch because I find it a little bit neater. So I'm going back into my stitched fabric, coming across a little bit, about 1/2 centimetre, and pull my needle through, back into the base fabric, again about 1/2 centimetre out, And what you're doing is creating a ladder. You're going back and forth in a zigzag motion all the way along and creating a ladder. So back into my stitched fabric. Base fabric. And just repeating all the way along until you get to the end of your hole. You can pull it nice and tight. Make sure that stuffing is still inside. The smaller your stitches, the neater it will be. And the less likely that you're going to get any stuffing trying to escape. So just take your time with this. And just work your way along. Almost there. Once you've got to the other end, I like to make a little knot. So I make a loop with my thread and I can hold on to that. I try and pick up or come under the stitch in my fabric that is from my machine. And then I bring the needle up through that loop. So I'm creating a knot. Pull nice and tight and then repeat. So make a loop. Find that stitch, needle up through the middle and pull tight. Then you can thread the needle through your fabric and come out about 1 inch away. Pull nice and tight so you get a little bit of a bunch, and then you can snip off that thread and it just hides it all inside. And that is our finished pincushion. Ready for pins. I hope you've liked this quick little tutorial and I look forward to seeing you in your finished makes. Come back again soon and I'll see if we can do some more work together. Bye!